In the ancient Mediterranean, bread did not sit on the table as a side. It carried the meal. Wheat, water, salt and heat turned into flatbreads that travelled well and fed many. People baked them thin for speed and fuel, not for ceremony, and once a flatbread existed, it invited a next step. It became a surface where whatever was available could be pressed, scattered or rubbed in. This was not a world of full pantries. For sailors, labourers and families watching every handful of grain, food needed to stretch. A little oil softened dry bread. Herbs covered staleness. A few onions or olives added bite without costing much. Even scraps of cheese could change everything. The logic stayed simple. Use bread as the base, then add small, strong flavours that made it feel like more than bread. Over time, the habit repeated across ports and marketplaces. Flatbread, then topping, then heat. It solved problems in one move. It saved fuel because the bread and the extras cooked together. It saved time because it could be eaten by hand on the move. And it saved money because it welcomed leftovers instead of wasting them. Long before anyone imagined pizza, the need for cheap, filling food already shaped its basic idea. Early modern Naples grew fast, and it grew unevenly. Jobs pulled people into the city, but wages rarely kept up, and rent squeezed entire families into tighter and tighter spaces. Hunger became a daily problem that needed a daily solution. In that pressure, a new kind of food economy took hold on the streets. It had to be cheap, it had to be filling, and it had to be ready now. Vendors sold foods that could be eaten while walking, with no plates, no cutlery, no waiting. Flatbread fit that job perfectly. Baked quickly, carried easily, and filling even when ingredients were scarce. Toppings stayed simple because they had to. A little oil, a pinch of salt, maybe garlic or herbs, sometimes small scraps of whatever was affordable that day. The point was not refinement. The point was survival with flavour. Out of that street routine, something more specific formed. In Naples, the flatbread stopped being just bread and started becoming pizza in a distinctly local way, softer, made to fold, sold in slices and priced for labourers who counted coins. Bakers and sellers learned what the poor needed most, warmth, calories and consistency, and they shaped the product around it. Pizza emerged as the working city's simplest promise, a full stomach for almost nothing. A new ingredient reached Europe from across the Atlantic, the tomato. It arrived as a curiosity, not a food people trusted. Many Europeans treated it like a dangerous plant, something to grow and look at, not to eat. But it kept spreading through ports and markets because it grew easily and produced heavily. In southern Italy, it found the right sun, and it became cheap enough for ordinary kitchens. In Naples, cooks and street sellers tested what others avoided. They learned that heat changed everything. Cooked down, the sharp fruit became a sauce that lasted longer, stretched further, and made poor ingredients taste richer. It turned plain bread into something brighter and more satisfying. Just as important, it covered flaws, stale dough, minimal toppings, hurried baking. The tomato did not just add flavour. It solved problems that poverty created. Once the tomato sauce met Neapolitan pizza, the dish changed identity. Before, toppings varied and depended on what could be found that day. Now there was a base that people expected, a red foundation that made each pie recognizable even when everything else stayed simple. Tomato also paired perfectly with salt and fat, so additions like cheese, garlic or anchovies suddenly made sense together. Naples turned a feared fruit into the taste people remembered. In the 1800s, pizza stopped being only something thrown together on the street. Naples saw more fixed pizzerias, and with them came repetition. The same customers returned, and they expected the same result. Bakers answered with routine, measured flour, planned fermentation, and dough made ahead instead of mixed at the last second. A craft that had lived by improvisation started living by rules. Those rules centered on heat. Wood-fired ovens became the standard tool because they delivered fierce temperatures that cooked fast and evenly. That changed everything. Dough had to be stretched to a thickness that could blister without drying out. Toppings had to be chosen and applied with restraint, so the center finished before it turned heavy. Speed was not a shortcut anymore. It became part of the method. As pizzerias repeated the same process day after day, recognizable styles took shape. Certain combinations returned again and again, not by accident, but because they worked in that oven, with that dough, in that time window. The pizza became consistent enough to be judged, compared, and preferred. It turned into a defined product, not just a cheap idea, and that made it portable as a reputation. By the late 1800s, pizza no longer stayed tucked inside Naples' poorest streets. It started appearing where it once did not belong. Middle-class customers tried it, then returned for more, not out of charity, but because it tasted good and felt modern. That shift mattered. A food that fed the desperate now attracted choice. And once choice entered the picture, pizza stopped being only a sign of poverty. Then the highest level of attention arrived. Italy's royal court visited Naples, and the Queen, Margherita of Savoy, tasted the city's most famous pizzas. The story spread fast, whether repeated exactly right or not. What mattered was the effect. If a queen could eat pizza, ordinary people could too, without embarrassment. Elite approval worked like a stamp. It pulled pizza upward, out of the shadows of class. At the same time, a newly unified Italy searched for symbols that felt shared, not regional. Pizza helped fill that need. A simple round of bread, tomato, and cheese could be described as national colours, and the idea travelled beyond Naples. More shops leaned into the identity, and customers leaned into the pride. Pizza still stayed affordable, but it gained something new: respect. That was the turning point. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Italy emptied out by the millions. Work disappeared, rents rose, and families took ships toward the Americas and Northern Europe. Many came from the south, and Neapolitans packed more than clothes and prayers. They carried habits, they carried hunger. Pizza travelled as knowledge in their hands: how to stretch dough, how to use heat, how to turn a few cheap ingredients into a meal. Abroad, pizza did not arrive as a national treasure. It arrived as immigrant food. In cities like New York, Buenos Aires, and Marseille, it took root where Italians lived close together, near docks and factories. Small bakeries and groceries served workers who wanted something familiar and filling. At first, it stayed inside the neighborhood. Outsiders often ignored it. But the demand was steady, and steady demand built businesses. Then the changes began because the new cities changed the pizza. Ingredients differed, and so did budgets. Some places had more wheat, more dairy, and more meat than Naples ever had. Ovens and fuel varied too, and bakers adapted to what they could get. Portions grew, toppings multiplied. The basic idea stayed simple: bread, heat, and a quick meal. But the flavour started speaking with a local accent. By the mid-1900s, pizza met an economy built for volume. Factories produced flour with steady quality week after week, so dough behaved the same in every shop. Industrial dairies turned mozzarella from a fresh local product into something that travelled and lasted. Costs dropped, supply stabilized, and portions became predictable. Pizza stopped depending on one baker's rhythm and one neighborhood's markets. It became something businesses could plan, price, and repeat. Technology pushed the change even harder. gas and electric ovens replaced the old limits of wood, giving restaurants consistent heat and faster turnaround. A kitchen could bake more pies with fewer surprises. Mixing machines sped up dough production. Refrigeration made it easier to store ingredients and prep ahead. The result sounded simple, but it mattered. Pizza became faster without needing a master at every step. Once speed and consistency arrived, expansion stopped being risky. Then pizza learned to travel. Freezing turned it into a supermarket item, not just a restaurant meal, and factories formed assembly lines for crusts, sauce, and cheese. At the same time, delivery models grew in cities, built around phones, cars, and insulated boxes. Pizza fit perfectly. It stayed edible after a ride, and it fed groups cheaply. This was the turning point. Pizza became scalable, made in bulk, sold everywhere, and eaten on demand. By the late 20th century, pizza stopped behaving like a local food that travelled. It started operating like a system. A new kind of business rose around it, the big pizza chain. Instead of relying on one skilled baker and one oven, these companies built repeatable routines. Dough, sauce, and cheese came in measured amounts. Training became scripted. The goal stayed simple: make the same pizza anywhere, fast. That promise of sameness changed what pizza meant. Chains scaled by franchising, letting thousands of owners buy a proven model and follow strict rules. Menus narrowed to what machines, supply trucks, and predictable timing could support. Marketing did the rest, selling families a reliable meal and teenagers an easy hangout. Pizza became a default option, not a special plan. Convenience turned into the main flavor. Once the franchise engine worked at home, it pushed outward. Global expansion followed trade routes, military bases, shopping malls, and new suburbs. Local tastes still shaped toppings, but the core product stayed controlled by central recipes and contracts. Ingredients traveled farther than ever, locked into corporate supply chains. The result felt unavoidable. Pizza turned into modern fast food, standardized, international, and always within reach. As pizza spread through chains, something snapped back in Naples. Many makers felt the product version had erased the craft version, so a backlash grew, led by pizzaioli, who treated rules as protection, not nostalgia. They pushed for clear standards, specific dough timing, fierce heat, simple toppings, and a soft center that folded. The point was not to stop change, it was to draw a line around what Neapolitan meant. That line soon turned into formal identity. Groups organized, trained apprentices, and demanded certification so customers could tell tradition from imitation. Courts and institutions backed some of those protections, and authentic became a label with consequences, yet the revival did not stay inside Naples. Artisan shops elsewhere copied the methods, imported ovens, and chased the same balance of chew, char, and speed. A craft once treated as ordinary now carried prestige and scrutiny. At the same time, a different energy surged. Regional Italian pizzas stepped forward with their own logic, thicker, thinner, crispier, pan-baked, long-fermented, each claiming legitimacy through local habit, not Neapolitan rules. Outside Italy, fusion went further. New flours, new sauces, unexpected toppings, even different shapes, designed for the ingredients at hand. The argument shifted. Pizza no longer meant one fixed thing. It became both a protected heritage and an open canvas. In the present day, pizza lived 3 lives at once. In Naples, rules got written down and defended, and some makers treated pizza like a protected craft with boundaries that mattered. In other places, chefs chased precision instead of speed, and pizza became a gourmet obsession with rare ingredients and long fermentation. The same food that once solved hunger now carried status, identity, and pride. At the same time, pizza stayed a global commodity, built for scale. Big systems pushed it into airports, school cafeterias, stadiums, and late-night counters, where a slice cost almost nothing and taste stayed familiar. Efficiency shaped the dough, the cheese, the ovens, and the timing. Convenience won countless meals. Pizza turned into a reliable answer to the same question everywhere: what could be eaten fast? These worlds collided every day. A visitor could pay $1 for a folded slice, then later spend a small fortune on a pie with imported flour and carefully sourced tomatoes. Both counted as pizza, and both existed because the food adapted without stopping. The contrast stayed sharp. It began as Neapolitan survival food, and it ended up as a planet-wide habit, defended like heritage and sold like a commodity.